You're listening to Hornier Than Thou with Gloria Perez and adult film star Max Magnum, as we teach you about sex, the LGBT community, and have candid conversations about how our conservative upbringings affected our sex-positive outlooks in adulthood.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Hornier Than Thou podcast. This is episode number 2. Thank you for sticking with us. This podcast title is called Two Wrongs Don't Make a Right. I am your host, Gloria Perez, and
I am your other host, Max Magnum, with 3 X's, in case you were wondering, for that Twitter handle. But yeah, so first, before we even get into it, I wanted to introduce, we're going to be doing weekly cocktails or cocktails of the week. And this week's is a citrus mimosa. We found the recipe on Big Y. You can go ahead and check out our Instagram, HTT_podcast, for the recipe there, which we'll be posting every week. And actually, we'll be linking all of our other socials too. We're still getting those set up right now. But anyways, into the topic without further ado. We're going to be talking Two Wrongs Don't Make a Right. So this is going to be all about open relationships, communication, cheating, etc. I was actually really curious, Gloria, like what has your experience been with this? I don't know if you are experienced in the realm of open relationships. Like, I kind of wanted to hear what you had to say first.
For sure. So just as a reminder for those who didn't listen to the prior episode, I am a straight heterosexual female. The answer is no. I've never been in an open relationship. Obviously, I have pondered the question. I've looked into it, not only through reading articles, but also to talking with friends and whatnot. There's pros and there's cons, right? Everyone is different. It has worked for some people, is what I've heard. For others, it hasn't. I know that in some cases it can strengthen the relationship because you are both cognizant of the reality that not all of us are meant to be monogamous. Some people will even go as far as saying that humans in general, like, a blanket statement, are not meant to be monogamous, but that's kind of, that's up there for interpretation. Cons, I will say, this is what I've heard. A lot of people that have had open relationships that haven't really worked out for them, I've heard that sometimes it just leads to deception and cheating, and then for the people that it has worked for them, they are very, very big on communication. And so there's all these intricacies, right? On a personal level, I would be open to discussing this with whoever my partner is at the time. But I will say that what I grapple with is, I don't know if I would be like that jealous person. Like, in theory, it sounds like this is healthy for your relationship.
Right.
You get to expand, you get to, have that open communication and talk about it while knowing about it, right? Because, for example, people who are married, and you don't just have to be married, but let's say you're married, it doesn't mean that you're blind, right? Like, there's still people out there that you're going to be attracted to. But does it open the door for more cheating, for more deception? Could you lose this person because, you opened that door? I think I would struggle with the jealousy part of it. And that's kind of where I'm at. And I think that is what has stopped me. I've never actually really pursued it in a way that was serious. Maybe my partners in the past and I have brushed the topic, but usually for us in straight, relationships, I think the stopping point is, could we really see could we really see our partner with somebody else physically, intimately, So that's where I'm at. I don't know if in the future I would want to. I'm very curious. I have so many questions. So Max, what about you? Tell me where you're at.
Oh my gosh, this is it's a relevant topic for me, as I just got out of an open relationship. It is a kind of a heated topic for me because I was cheated on. But let me just throw a disclaimer out there. Like every relationship that I had prior to this previous one with my ex was actually monogamous and very exclusive. And whenever I would have those conversations, because obviously in the gay community, open relationships are very common. I don't know the exact statistic, but I would say out of my immediate circle of friends, about 50% of them that are in relationships are open in some capacity, maybe even a larger percent than 50%. I really don't know that many monogamous, exclusive gay couples. So being on the other side of things for so long, I really had a hard time connecting, like, how does it make sense? Like, how is it healthy for a relationship, right? To be open.
Right.
And only in this recent relationship, we kind of, well, let me, I want to get to that, but like, let me talk a little bit more about the cons, because you had mentioned like pros versus cons, right?
Right.
So a pro that I've learned through experience, through my relationships, is that if you are going to be open, right? A lot of relationships that fail, whether it's marriages or long-term relationships, a lot of them have to do with the inability to fully express yourself sexually. So, for instance, that's when cheating happens in deception, like you talked about, or you feel like you can't share that part of yourselves with others. And for the most part, if you are in an open relationship, I think you've at least bridged that gap a little bit in being able to communicate, what your needs are to some extent, right? Even if you're not fully open, you're maybe a little bit more open than your average monogamous couple. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a huge pro. And I think being a very sex-driven community, being a part of the gay community, that's important. And obviously, I think that's the reason why it's such a prevalent type of relationship or dynamic. But a con is as well that, like, it can lead to deception. It can lead to cheating, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. I've experienced it firsthand. I think if you have trust, I think if you have communication, you don't have to deal with that. But, you don't really know until the lie smacks you in the face, and that's kind of what happened. So actually, before we sat down to do this podcast tonight, I looked up a couple of facts because I was just curious, and I wasn't sure if you knew any of these. So I'm actually going to quiz you. This is from Neil Wiki. He's, I think, a psychotherapist and a relationship counselor. Yeah. And he kind of published some statistics, or reported some statistics about open relationships. Mm-hmm. So let me ask you, what % of couples do you think are actually in an open relationship?
I'm going to guess, I don't think it's a very high number. Mm-hmm. I'm going to guess 5 to 7%.
So it actually surprised me. It is low. It's actually only 1%. And I think the reason that surprised me, and I actually don't know how recent that statistic is, but to me, I felt like it was a little bit more. I wasn't sure.
You thought
but
it was higher?
I thought it was a little bit higher, yeah. Okay. What % of people have experimented with opening their relationship or have explored somewhat of an open dynamic? So they might not be in an open dynamic, but they've experimented in some form or fashion with that.
Meaning that they have disclosed it in some way, shape, or form? Because,
no, I think it means I think it means they have experimented, maybe had a threesome, but they're not in a fully blown open relationship. Because for those of you who don't know, there are different degrees, right? There's the people who can just message. Well, there are people that can just message other people or send photos or play together or hook up separately, or there's rules and restrictions and things like that.
That's a good point.
But what percentage of people do you think have kind of experimented in that at all?
In that realm, whether it's just I think that's definitely a higher number, I would say. Well, in my opinion, obviously, I'm taking a stab here in the dark. I'm going to say 20%.
That is actually exactly right. It's 20%.
Really?
Yeah, 20%.
Are you serious?
20% of couples.
Wow.
20% of couples have experimented with that.
Wow.
I'm
not cheating, guys. He didn't give me the answers. I promise.
I was actually really surprised about this next number. What percentage of people or that go into open relationships or couples what's the failure rate?
The failure rate once they enter that open relationship.
Correct.
Oh, I think that's, I'm going to say about 60% of open relationships fail. That's my guess, because communication is a big piece of it, and communication is so hard for human beings, period.
Right.
So that's my guess.
Well, actually, kind of piggybacking off of that, because you said it's all about communication. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, I think, get into open relationships to put a Band-Aid on problems.
That's interesting.
Instead of it being for
like the healthy aspect,
the holistic purposes behind it. They actually get into it to put a Band-Aid on maybe one partner having a low sex drive or there being low communication and things like that. And that's not the healthy way to do it. I actually think that's how a large majority of people do it, unfortunately. So the failure rate's actually 92%, which actually I thought that was incredible.
It's
and
much higher.
I don't know, though, if that's just like within the heterosexual community. The article that I read didn't say, because I know a lot of gay couples that are in open relationships that actually have definitely made it work.
Yeah.
Now, the last stat I have for you, what percentage of the population have actually expressed interest in opening things up in their relationships?
Expressed.
So maybe not done it, but express interest.
I would say, well, I guess you have to like consider religion and stuff like that. But I guess I would say like 50%, because I reckon to say that almost everyone has pondered it, you know, maybe wished it or desired it. I would say, but not everybody acts upon it, obviously, for various reasons. So I'm going to say like vocalized it as far as intent, maybe I'm going to say 50%.
It's actually only 25%. And
Liars.
I don't think, I want to clarify, I don't think that last stat was a NeoWiki statistic. I saw that somewhere else just for clarity, but yeah, it said only 25%. So I'm curious. They didn't give a lot of detail in regards to these statistics. So I don't know how accurate they are, but it's just what I found with a little bit of internet browsing. But I kind of wanted to talk about my previous relationship and my experience with the cheating.
Well, can I ask you a couple of questions? Okay.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Okay, because I'm really curious, and I kind of want to fire a couple of questions at you, because obviously you've been in an open relationship, and I feel like these questions are probably things that audience, you know, people in our audience who haven't been in an open relationship are curious about. I think jealousy is one of the biggest things, you know. I think that
absolutely
that's kind of like this a big red stop for a lot of people. It's like you can have that comprehension and that understanding that it could be something good, that it is kind of healthy-ish, you know, depending on the dynamic. Obviously, everyone's different. However, the jealousy, like how, like for you.
Is your question like, how do you handle that jealousy,
or
what do you think?
So yes, that's the second part. But like, did you ever experience jealousy yourself while you were in this open relationship, even though you guys
absolutely
agreed about it?
So here's the weird thing is that like there's two sides to this question. On one hand, I do think jealousy is tied to insecurity a little bit, right? Like I have learned there's varying degrees of jealousy. There's healthy jealousy and there's non-healthy jealousy. And I think the non-healthy is tied to insecurities. And I think you have to have enough like introspective capabilities to really discern where you fall there. But on the other hand, I think there are people that just have different dispositions on this topic, and I don't think if I don't know if it has to do with like their attachment style or maybe what. But for instance, when I went through couples therapy, Apollo. Sorry guys, our dog. He'd be a little crazy.
We have a cute dog in the background. You can't see him because if we let him loose right now, this would be destroyed.
It's chaos.
Yeah.
It's chaos.
But he's cute. You'll see him in some posts later.
Hey guys, we thought this was a good time to break. We had to put the doggo away so he wasn't interrupting the podcast anymore. But we thought, what a perfect time to introduce you to this week's sponsor, Coalesce Design Studios. The owner, Rachel Coe, is absolutely fantastic. She's based out of Fredericksburg, Virginia, but she can work virtually. She actually did all of our logo work and design work. She met us every step of the way, making sure that we were happy with the designs that she did, from anything from the original drafts all the way to the final product. She provided us even more than than what we asked for a very, very reasonable price. And in addition, she does anything from logo work to ads, digital ads. She can do SVGs for, products or merchandise or even apparel. So definitely check out her website. It's going to be coalescedesign.com. That's coalesce, COEALESCE design.com. All right, we are back. What the heck was I saying? We're talking about
jealousy.
Oh, jealousy. That's right. So basically what I was saying is there's like two different types of people, I feel, that have different dispositions in regards to open relationships and jealousy. I think that, this could be based on your attachment style, because I think it's called anxious attachment style, and my ex was avoidant attachment style. And so with an avoidant attachment style, it's kind of like you like the chase, you kind of fall rather quickly, but then you pull away a little bit. And for me, on the other side of the spectrum, I think I had a little bit more insecurities and jealousy when it came to potentially him cheating on me. Plus, I'd been cheated on in the past. So because of all that, we were just very, very different people. And ultimately, it led to our downfall. So, for him, he didn't have a jealous bone in his body, really. Mm-hmm. I mean, I could do just about anything, and he was happy with it as long as
he detached emotions. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Like for him, he said he was able to separate sex and emotions, right? Like for him, and I think that I can too, right? Like if I'm single and I go to hook up with someone, it doesn't mean I'm going to have feelings for them or develop feelings for them, but I think what he meant was within the relationship. But something that's interesting that I noticed, or that I kind of surmised from our relationship, our insecurities were what actually led to our respective issues. So for instance, he wasn't jealous of me, going out and doing crazy sexual things, because for him, the crazier it was, the more detached it was. He was a little bit more jealous about me having like one-on-one sex with someone else, a little bit, right? Or like if he had his rathers, like he was a little more jealous in that arena, right?
Quick interjection. More jealous of the one-on-one than like an orgy or like...
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And so what's interesting about that is I think it's because he was insecure about how he was as a boyfriend, right? Like he didn't always feel like he was seeing didn't always feel like he was meeting my emotional needs, if that makes sense. So of course, if I'm one-on-one with somebody, there was a little bit more of a risk for me to like potentially develop feelings, I guess, or that's how he felt about it. And on the flip side, for me, I was actually more insecure about not meeting his sexual needs, right? So I would rather him have gone out and have one-on-one sex with someone as opposed to gone out and done any crazy sexual, had any crazy sexual endeavors or experiences, go to an orgy, like whatever, right? So it was just interesting, the stuff that we learned about ourselves. I think it all boils down to communication, really.
Yeah.
I think like at the end of the day, if you can communicate your needs, but more important than your needs are your boundaries, right? Because the thing is that people often ask me after our relationship, wait, he cheated on you? How exactly did he cheat on you? This kind of brings me into the way that there are like different dynamics of open relationships, right? So like I mentioned earlier, there's different degrees of how open you are. For some people, it is, simply the idea of hooking up together, things like that. For others, they're fully open, but even for those who are fully open, they have a certain set of ground rules, right? So like, for some people, it's about the intimacy. You can't kiss the other person, or you have to wear protection, or da-da-da. For us... So
there's like rules, like very specific rules, is what you're saying.
Right, very specific, because you have to be extra communicative about, what you're okay and with, and like what your boundaries are.
Right.
And for us, I didn't want to limit the intimate part of that. Like, it wouldn't make sense for us to go hook up with someone if we weren't going to be able to kiss them and things like that. Our specific rules were you have to, number one, ask first, right? And if, for instance, I'm sleeping or I'm out of town and you can't get in touch with me, that doesn't mean you have permission to go do it. So you had to get permission first. Afterwards, you had to, tell me about it, or I had to tell him about it. We did like to share the details. There are a lot of other couples who like to turn a blind eye or ignorance is bliss and they don't want to know the details, we did. Then past that, if we said no, it meant no. There was like no real wiggle room there for arguing out of it. If we were uncomfortable, we were uncomfortable. And then lastly, it was also like we had this kind of rule that if someone was interested more in one of us than the other, we just immediately shut that down because we didn't want to like open it up to incite jealousy in our relationship. And we felt like that was kind of a formula for inciting jealousy. And so people will ask me, how did he cheat on you? In my opinion, if you're in an open relationship and cheating then means breaking the boundaries that you had set. Not only did he not ask me permission, and not tell me about it after, but he also admitted to deleting the messages. And the way that I found out about it was I found a recording of him on this guy's OnlyFans, right? Mm-hmm. I didn't even know this guy existed.
Which you were not aware of, obviously.
Right, and I didn't even, okay. I was out back home taking care of my sick mom who had just gotten out of surgery, and he was out gallivanting around the city and, you know, getting fucked. So, you know, that obviously was cheating in every form. And he even tried to defend it afterwards and say like, well, like, you know, we were in an open relationship and da-da-da, but he knew the rules. He knew the boundaries. He actually brought up a really good point to me one time, which was like, if the shoe was flipped, if you were in my situation, how would you feel? Right. And so I, you know, had to tell him the same thing. I was like, regardless of the fact that you knew you broke boundaries, like you hit on my biggest insecurity because he knew I had been cheated on in the past. So for anybody who's out there who's like, oh, you do OnlyFans, you know, or you were in an open relationship, how is it considered cheating? Cheating is breaking the boundaries that you set. You literally just read
my mind because like that's another thing is
right.
Like, is it cheating? It's an open relationship, but again, it goes back to your point, communication. So sorry, continue.
Right. No, yeah. I mean, that's a lot of people are curious about that, and I think it's very important. This is where communication comes into play. Is that if you communicate what those boundaries are beforehand, as specifically as possible, you're trying to eliminate what I would call as the gray area. Right? Okay. It's got to be very black and white. I know that this is okay. I do not know that this is okay. If you leave room for gray area because you don't have good communication skills with your partner, then there are probably going to be situations you get yourself into when you're upset. But throughout the 2.5 years that we dated, I never once cheated on him. We actually were open all the way until, we opened things at the end of the relationship, but for the majority of that 2.5 years, we actually would only hook up together. And he even told me if we get into this open dynamic, because he wanted to explore it, he was like, if you're not comfortable, we can dial it back, we can stop. There did come a point where I said, hey, listen, like, I'm not really comfortable with this. And he was like, well, I'm sorry, this is the only way that I want it. And if we can't have it this way, we're not going to work out. So there were a lot of red flags
I don't know, but that sounds like a no-no.
Right.
I mean, because the whole point sounds like an agreement, right? It's an agreement that you have with your partner, and it's almost like a contract. And if you violate it, then, you know, if you go out of those terms, essentially, then it's constituted as cheating, right?
Right.
It's like any other monogamous partnership. I'll let you finish your thought because I do have a couple follow-up questions.
No, go ahead, because I think that was basically it.
Now
I sound like I'm like the scorned ex and I'm just ranting on my podcast.
This is not just scornful.
But yeah. No. What are your questions?
So I just want to reel it back because going back to the jealousy thing, and I don't want to beat a dead horse. I promise I'll wrap the jealousy thing up quickly, guys. But I want to get very specific with the jealousy aspect of it because I think a lot of people want to know, how do you cope with that? How do you cope when, whatever, you know, you've had the communication, you've established your agreement, your communication, your boundaries, everything we just discussed. But how do you cope with jealousy when you are the one, for example, staying home and you're seeing your partner walk out the door?
What does the dynamic look like when they're actually going to do it, right? Well, I actually always was a little bit jealous, and I think that like that speaks to the foundation of your relationship, right? It's your happiness. No one else can make you happy, right? So it's like, are you happy on your own? Do you fulfill yourself, or are there insecurities there? It's also about how much do you trust your partner? How much have you guys communicated? When all of that is fully in line with each other, I think it can work. But oftentimes I feel like people get into open relationships as a band-aid for their, issues, whether it's, like I said earlier, like low sexual chemistry, or, one partner has a higher sex drive than the other, or whatever it is, wandering eyes, whatever. And so for us, usually we would try to not detract from quality time spending together. So it's not like we had plans to go out to dinner or watch a movie, and then it's like, oh, wait, I want to go do this instead. We usually wouldn't do something like that. So it was usually when like one person was available and the other person wasn't. Let's say I was working and he had free time, vice versa. Or let's say one of us wasn't feeling well. Obviously, we would prioritize taking care of that other person, but if the other person was okay, they just weren't feeling up to going out and, you know, hooking up, then we wouldn't do that. And it varies, like the amount, the frequency, you know, some weeks more than others. There are months at a time we went, even when we weren't like hooking up completely separately, just together, there are months we went at a time without like actually bringing anyone else into the relationship at all in any capacity.
So there were definitely, okay, so what I'm gathering, correct me where I'm wrong, what I'm gathering is that there obviously has to be some kind of, you have to be real with yourself, is what I'm hearing.
Definitely.
Like, there has to be this level of rawness, of,
oh my gosh,
you know
so
what I mean?
much,
Like
yeah,
introspective
definitely.
rawness of, I'm feeling jealous right now, he, she, whatever, is walking out the door right now. I am, you know, and you sit there with your feelings.
Well,
How do you sit
that's
there with your
that's what I
feelings?
told him. I didn't want to be sitting at home twiddling my thumbs, you know. Actually,
True.
I would
I mean,
try to
not
play
just saying
either.
you sit at home,
I would
but-
try to either plan a hookup when he did it, so I wasn't really thinking about him
Okay.
doing it.
Alignment.
So that's one way. Yeah. So it was alignment, like because sex is distracting, and if I was going out and having sex, I wasn't really thinking at least in the moment about what he was doing, or I didn't feel like I was like left out in that regard. But I'm not necessarily the best person to ask because I definitely suffered from a lot of jealousy issues, and
Right.
even after being in an open relationship, obviously, especially since it ended poorly, but like I still don't know if that was for me. I definitely know
okay.
after exploring with him, though, I don't ever want to be in a fully monogamous relationship either, though. I definitely, in my future relationship, want that person to be extremely sex positive, be okay with the fact that I have an OnlyFans, but in addition, I also want to hook up with them. Like, I want to have new sexual experiences with them. I think it keeps things interesting because I'm sorry, I don't care who you are, but if you say having sex with the same person day after day, year after year, from now until the day you die is fulfilling for you, you're lying to yourself, in my opinion. I think the emotional connection can be fulfilling. I think the partnership is fulfilling, but there is no way. Sex is all about exploring, right? Sex is all about pushing your boundaries. Sex is all about like learning someone's body. And there comes a point where it gets mundane to do it with the same person over and over again. Now, you guys can push your boundaries too, like together. So I'm not saying jump right into an open dynamic, but for me
When you're
personally,
done. Sorry. Finish that thought.
oh yeah, but for me personally, I just know I would want some type of hybrid. I just wouldn't want to be fully open again.
I love that. I have so many questions to everything you just said. First question, because it sounds like it's a little bit of a spectrum.
Right.
Right?
Definitely. Oh, absolutely. Everything's a spectrum, right?
Everything's a spectrum, right? So, given that, in your experience, and again, folks, this is all in our experience, what words or what advice can you give our audience as to, you know, anybody out there who's considering it, hasn't done it, whatever, in your experience, how could you determine that you are ready to embark on this open relationship? What are the signs that you are ready? Because that's a big thing. It's like, how do you cross that finish line or that milestone or whatever, you know? How do you determine that you as a couple are ready?
I think as opposed to ready, I think the answer or the
prepared.
question should be prepared. I like that. I think it all has to do with how I'm trying to figure out a way to say this. I just thought of the answer when you were asking, but more like, what reasons are you doing it for? I think that's what it comes down
why?
to. Right. Why are you doing
Why
it?
are you
You
doing
have
it?
to ask yourself
That's a
that
good
question
question.
first. If you were doing it, once again, because, there's like a lack of sex in your relationship or you're wanting other things, you first have to start with questioning yourself, right? Then, in addition to, why are you doing it? Why does your partner want it? Right? You need to know why they want it. Then you assess, are we ready? Right? And are we ready means Are we on the same page? Have we defined our boundaries? And do we know that we're going to be emotionally okay? And even if someone slips up or if something happens, that we're going to be able to navigate these issues because we understand we're navigating into uncharted territory here. Right. So that would be my best advice. I would ask, why do I want it? Why does my partner want it? Do we have open communication? Can we be honest about these topics? Are we prepared for what happens if things go south? Do we have an exit strategy? And I think if all that's in line with you, I definitely think it's something you should explore. But it's definitely not something that you should do haphazardly, especially when you've got other extraneous factors involved. If you have kids, right? If you live with family, if there is a combined financial situation going on, or anything that really puts you at stake to have real consequences if the relationship goes south because you entered into something you weren't ready for. Like, these are all things that have to be considered. Absolutely.
That's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up about, having kids, because maybe this is like a topic for a future episode, but how do you do this when you have a family? How is this managed? How do you maneuver? How do you navigate? Whatnot? I guess my other follow-up question would be, how do you know when it's healthy? What are the signs that it is healthy?
I mean, if you're doing something to avoid something, right? Like if you're doing this to avoid the issues in the relationship instead of confronting them head on, have you gone to couples counseling and determined like where the issues lie? Because a couples counselor, depending on who you have, they might encourage an open relationship. But any couples counselor, any wise and educated couples counselor would not recommend it if they didn't feel that you were ready, right? Mm-hmm. So in other words, if you're in couples counseling, it doesn't necessarily mean you have issues. Maybe you're just working on enhancing communication. And they might suggest this as an idea to improve the relationship. However, that does not necessarily mean...
Wait, you're actually saying that this has been suggested in couples counseling before?
Oh, definitely. Not in couples counseling for me, but I definitely know that it has, for sure. Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it depends on your couples counselor and what their viewpoints are. But in terms of having kids, I think we should save that for a future episode because that is probably a whole nother topic to get into. But I think we should probably wrap it up here. Okay. We appreciate everybody coming out, listening to episode 2 of Hornier Than Thou. 2 rights don't make a wrong. Once again, we're still getting all of our socials activated. We just did a photo shoot this morning, which was super, super fun. So we're really excited to start posting more content for you guys. But you can follow our Insta at HTT_podcast. You can also find us on Twitter at HTT_podcast_. And then we're also going to have all of these podcasts posted live in video format for our YouTube channel. We're going to have a TikTok going and a Facebook, and you'll get all of our socials through our link tree that will be attached to our Instagram. So be a little patient with us. We've got all of that coming, but go ahead and check us out on Instagram today.
Yes, please do. And honestly, you guys, I know that, 20-25 minutes is not enough to encompass all of these topics. We could go on for eons talking about it. So drop your comments, send in your feedback.
Please ask us. We want to answer your questions, your burning questions. We know we have a pretty diverse group of people listening. And so, there are going to be things that we haven't even thought about, we haven't even thought about asking ourselves or talking about. So please reach out to us. We would love to. And then if you're a small business and you have something to contribute to the podcast and you would like to be sponsored in a future episode, please give us a DM, slide into our DMs and let us know, because we would love to work with you. We're all about partnering with small businesses, especially LGBT owned and operated businesses. So please feel free to reach out. But other than that, thanks so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.
Thank you for joining.